Welcome to this 13th webinar in a row. Today, the topic will be overcoming team differences. How do we actually reconcile? How do we figure out how to get the team to become a functioning, well-functioning team? That's the topic of today. And this is something many people have asked about. And again, we do like that you are asking because please send suggestions. We will then squeeze in the topic. So let me just get my PowerPoint shared with you, and we should be ready to rock and roll. So now, most of you have probably been working in different kinds of teams, some that has worked really well, and then some where it just didn't work. Sometimes when it doesn't work, it's because we have different goals. Sometimes it's because our personalities are different. And this is what we're going to be looking at today. What are the reasons? And then what can you do about it? And the reason I'm going to spend a lot of time also talking about the reasons is if we don't know what to solve, it's very difficult to solve it. This is where I think some people go wrong with the standardized method for reconciling in a team, is that they just use the same approach over and over again. But there are different approaches depending on what is the issue. So we're going to look at that, but we're going to start out in the beautiful end where everything is working. So when you think about a functional team where things work, this is in a team where everybody contributes. And this is so important, that people feel that they're part of the team, they want to be part of the team, and they want to contribute. And this is super important. You can imagine if you have a football team and there's only 2 players who wants to contribute and the 9 others are basically looking at the spectators and the grass. It's not going to be a very well-functioning team. But when all 11 come together, we also see sometimes that even though they don't have the star profiles, a weaker team, so to speak, can actually go in and defeat one of the big teams because the big team didn't have a team day. So we know that when everybody contributes, we have a very well-functioning team. Another important aspect is that you actually trust each other. If there's distrust, it doesn't work. Again, holding on to my football metaphor, if I want to pass the ball to somebody, I have to believe that this person is capable of actually handling the ball. And if they're not, I may not do it. So trust is so crucial as well. And then we have to be open in our communication. We have to be able to talk open, freely, and everybody has to, again, here contribute. This is, again, the key word is contribution. Because if I share my ideas and you share your ideas and we are open to each other's ideas, then we can create something beautiful. Another thing that really is difficult is if there's no clear roles. So people don't know what to do on the team. Again, holding on, I'm sorry for that, but to the football metaphor, if we don't know who's the goalie, who's going to then take care of the goal? And if all 11 wants to be the striker, well, we're going to have a problem with the defense. So we got to have clear roles. They have to be well defined and they have to be known not only by the individual, but also by the other people on the team. And then, of course, we need to have some kind of quality control so that we know where are we going? Are we doing this well? Are we following the processes we have agreed on so that we are together going in the right direction? And then also another important aspect is creativity. And in dysfunctional teams, you will see very little creativity because people are not working together and making things better. We need to constantly improve, and this is so crucial. And then, of course, that there is a balance. And this is what I've seen some leaders do not get. They don't understand the importance of the social part of the teamwork. So they will maybe allow it, but not necessarily participate, which again then isn't really a functional team because if the leader is not taking part, well, why not? So you got to make sure that there's a good balance. Of course, it shouldn't be all chit chat and fun, but we should make sure that there is a social business balance in the team. So when all of these things come together, we have a wonderfully well-functioning team. However, sometimes we don't. And when we look at the dysfunctional team, very often it's because there is no common purpose. We're going to get back to how to solve this, but again, we're just pointing out some of those obvious reasons. So lack of purpose, that we're not going in the same direction. We don't understand what we want. We don't even know if we want the same. That is a very dysfunctional thing. And then, of course, if we have poor communication and we don't know how to interact with each other, and again, interpersonal skills is so important, because this is where we're talking about emotional intelligence. And sometimes you have teams where they just don't know how to get along with each other because they don't have the skills and nobody taught them how to do it. And then, of course, we have the competence. If people are lacking skills and they can't really be open about it, so competence can go two ways here. It is whether they're lacking the skills, but also if they're afraid of speaking up about lacking them. In a great team, everybody can speak up and say, hey, I really don't know how to do this. And then the other team members will help or teach and train you so you can do it. But in a dysfunctional team, people are hiding because they don't want to show what they can't do. Because again, we're not doing this together. Another very important aspect is the team leader. I already pointed out a few times. But when you have somebody who is the technically appointed team leader, but who does not step into those shoes, you're going to have somebody else trying to take over. And this can lead to lots of battles, particularly if you have multiple people wanting to take over the team leadership. In that case, you can have real fights in there, not necessarily physical, but you're going to see it in the way people behave, how they try to position themselves. So it's very important that if you are the leader, that you are a clear leader. Now, a clear leader doesn't mean dominant, and this is important that you don't start thinking that there's equals. It just means that you're a clear leader, you take on the responsibility, you understand, you engage with your team, and all the things we generally speaking talk about in team leadership training. Now, we also have that people want to be seen as agreeing with the leader, and then do not express their own opinions. And this is also very, very dangerous. It's dangerous because the leader, although probably very smart, may not necessarily know everything and may not have the best ideas. So the fact that we are not able to speak up, that we're not able to disagree, is not good, because that can lead to catastrophe. Same thing happens when we are not sharing the information. If people are afraid of sharing the information, either for what will happen if they do, or for losing power position if they pass on the information, or they consider, if I have this information and I shield it, I have an advantage over the other team members. Yeah, but that is dysfunctional. And then, of course, we have one of the human factors here is called groupthink. And this is when so much is importance is put on consensus instead of making the right decision. Now, there are cultures where consensus is considered the only way forward. We even see it in some national cultures. However, if other people disagree, you will keep fighting to get the consensus instead of saying, wait a minute, this is not right. So we really have to make sure that the team wants to explore the alternative solutions. And when you don't, and you just go, oh yes, let's just make sure that we agree because that is better than anything, then we have the concept of groupthink, and this can also lead to catastrophe. So you can see a lot of these things I'm pointing out here are also related to the human factors that we talked about back in the first week. So you can see how much of this are crisscrossing from the same perspectives. Now, you also have people in a dysfunctional team who is not taking their load. So they're basically just sitting. You can see on the illustration here, the guy sitting in the basket in the front while two others are doing the hard work. This is also very annoying. So somebody who wants to just ripe the fruits and say, hey, we did this in the team, although they didn't participate. So it's very important that it goes back to the mutual contribution. It's very important that everybody contributes. And again, as a leader, you have to notice if somebody is free riding. So they're just there for the ride, but not doing the effort. And then, of course, we can also have a dynamic in there when we feel that we are being judged by others, and thus I hold back. I don't speak up. I don't contribute in the dialogues, in the conversations, in the discussions. I don't contribute in the creativity process either, because if I say, then I'm going to have the whole team coming down on me, say, oh, we tried this before. Now, very often we see this, for instance, when we have new team members who doesn't know all the things that has been going on before, and they come up with a great idea, and then they really go, no, 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 no. And if you do that a couple of times, you can be very sure that these people will not speak up again. So this is the challenge, because again, when we come down hard on people who do contribute, who come in with their ideas, who's not afraid of speaking up, if we continue just holding them down, they will be staying down there. So again, this is, if you're the team leader, something you have to look out for and make sure that, well, let's hear everyone, and it doesn't matter if it's been said before, as long as it's a great idea. And you got to remember here, all ideas are great. They may not be realistically doable, but the idea is always great. This is something many people find difficult. But if you think about it, and this comes back to also the way that very famous Walt Disney had his creativity process, was that he divided it, because in a very typical team meeting, we're like, okay, who has ideas? And then somebody will say something, and then we will have all the armies pulling in their weapons and shooting down the ideas, and very often going personal about the person coming with them. What do you know? But Walt Disney, he had a wonderful idea that if we separate the processes so that having the ideas is taking place in one team of people, and that idea we do together with the creative people, and then we take it to the animators who can then figure out how can this happen. So the how people, and then we take it to the critical people who can then say what's wrong with this, and then we can circle it around until we have the perfect idea. This process is so simple to use in a business setting as well, even though you don't have to move around in rooms, but just simply saying this is only ideas and no negative comments, because we just want the ideas. And remember, it's never the person that's wrong. The idea may not be doable, but the idea is always great, because great ideas are great. Without them, we get nowhere. We have no development. So this is also something where, again, you can see some patterns here, that how much of these things you can recognize from team meetings, either where you're running them yourself or where you're participating. I've seen this in so many meetings, and it's really not good for the meetings, not good for the team dynamics. It really doesn't help. So here are things to look at. So you can say, okay, here we know that when these things are going on, this is what we have to solve. And again, I'm pointing this out because there are so many things in a team that can be dysfunctional, and it doesn't have to be all of it, but one of these things may be enough to ruin the whole process, depending, of course, what the process is. Now, when we put it into types of dysfunctional teams, then we have the individualistically oriented teams where everybody is just out for themselves, they don't have a unified effort, and people are striving for power and attention, and this is really ruining it. Now, if you remember when we did last week, we had team dynamics. We talked about the development phases of a team, and in the first stage where you see people coming together, and then in the second where they start fighting to position yourselves, this is where we can see a lot of this coming out. And again, it can be avoided. I'll show you later how. We also have teams where we want to avoid conflict at any cost. This could also be the stage 3. Remember, those of you who were here last week, it is where we get along. We try to be politically correct, not to hurt anybody, because we want to start having some kind of productivity. But if this becomes a team pattern that we cannot disagree, and we just go for compromises, then we're never going to go for the optimal solutions, and we will have mediocrity. And this is, again, in order to move on to the next level, we have to challenge each other. And sometimes when we do that, we do not necessarily agree, and then we may have a discussion, we may have a conflict, but for the sake of moving forwards. That's not bad. Conflict just means we're disagreeing. And then, of course, we can have also teams where the decision process is not clear. There can be two reasons, either simply because we don't really know how to make the decision, who makes the decisions, and the leader for sure doesn't do it. Or we can have the other one where the leader makes all the decisions and just communicates to the team, this is how it's going to be. Now, for some people, and if you remember all the talk I've done about motive, you know that some people actually like being told. However, there are also a lot of people who likes to be involved in the decision making. Doesn't necessarily mean they have the last word, but they really need to feel involved. Otherwise, they'll be demotivated, and then they're going to stop contributing. So in both of these cases, we're not going to have the right, because also if the leader makes all the decisions and the leader suddenly isn't there, how are we going to make the decisions? Now, at the end of the day, you can say, well, arguably, it is the leader's responsibility. But we see also leaders having some who likes to take them themselves and some who really likes to involve the team. And then we see some who likes to involve the team so much that they will wait forever until they have consensus, no matter how long time it takes. And I'm not saying consensus decisions are bad, but if they drag out too long, it can slow down the team. And if we only have to have consensus, then we may also get bad decisions simply because nobody objected because it was getting too much trouble. So decision process is also something you have to look at as well. And I invite you now to think about the teams you're part of, and then think about the things we just described here. What are the things you recognize from your team? What are the things, because this shows you where you should start working. I like to look at this as a surgeon. When I come in as a consultant looking at a team, I have to feel my way forward. I have to start asking questions about what is it that doesn't work. And then I start organizing it inside and say, okay, where do we have to start to get these people to meet each other? Sometimes you have so much conflict that you can't start moving forward until you actually have done real conflict resolution. Now, this is not often, but for sure it can happen. And I'm just going to take you through the quick steps of conflict resolution. This is by sure not a conflict management training in itself, because that takes a lot more time. But first of all, take the fighting parties, have them come together. You may not even separate them from the rest of the team, because this depends whether the rest of the team is taking part of this or not. But have the opposing parties meet directly, and then first of all agree what it is that you disagree on. This can in itself be very resolving, and then figure out what has to happen. Now, a good idea is to have everybody expressing their position, their story, what was behind this, how come I see it this way, what is important to me. And then from there you can then merge and say, okay, what do we agree on is the outlines. And of course, then we have to brainstorm for solutions. Again, the mistake people do if they're too operational in their mind is they just find one solution, the first and the best, and then they move forward. But the first and the best may not be the best one. So make sure that you have multiple solutions before you start deciding. So again, very quick, just taking you through the basic conflict resolution steps, but sometimes we have to do that. And if the leader is not directly involved, it is the leader who can go in and be sort of the facilitator for this process. It's simple, just follow these 3 steps, and you will see that you can actually get quite far. But you've got to have the ground rules so that people don't start arguing and interrupting each other. Now, what can we then do to make sure that we are in the same boat and we are rowing at the same pace and in the same direction? Well, one of the things I like to do, and I have like I said, I have a toolbox that I bring in. And again, it will depend, because not everything can fix all. You know, a hammer can't fix all repairs. So, but I'm just going to show you some of the things that I'm doing. And again, sometimes, yes, you have to start with real conflict resolution, But if we want to make sure that people are aligned, then team purpose is that's number one. Because again, if we're not aiming in the same direction, it's going to be difficult, and we may be going in and thinking that everybody is, and then we are all aiming away from each other. So we got to have the common team purpose. We also got to make sure that, of course, we have company values many places, but inside the team there will be values as well. And what are those values? Do we agree on those? And then we have to discuss what they mean to us. And then we come back here to the roles. Now remember I said if there's no clear roles, then it can be difficult, because then people don't know what's expected from them in the team. And also, what are the team objectives? And this is interesting, because both the purpose and the team objective is something I see many teams struggling with when we're doing this process. The purpose is not goals. The purpose is a bigger thing. The thing we're aiming at that's not so specific, but then we have the objectives which are more specific. And what people seem to be struggling with is what is team objectives and what is individual objectives. Because team objectives is a thing we as a team coming together has to achieve together. A lot of people here keep stating individual objectives, but that's not the case. It is what should be the outcome of us working together. Just like the team purpose is, why are we brought together as a team? What is the purpose of us being together as a team? And then, of course, we have to look at the team processes. How do we process? Now, this will be decision making as well, and also accountability. So team processes is the communication process. We make sure everybody is informed, and how then we move on to decision making. How do we make decisions also when the leader is not there? And how do we keep each other accountable for the things we have agreed on? Also very important, and something I see a lot of people struggling with as well when we're doing this exercise, because they're not used to keeping each other accountable. And accountable doesn't mean that you should bring in the baseball bat, but it means that there has to be some kind of feeling that people will do what they're supposed to and what they committed to. And then finally, of course, looking at what are the resources we have inside the team, what are the teams we're lacking inside the team, and where can we find them so that people actually know where to go to get the job done. So team charter, super important, and it's a way of aligning the team, but, and here comes the big but, I love that when you go, but we also know, and this is what I've been talking about now, I think pretty much every day, the motives, the intrinsic motives could be the reason for the clashing. And there are 9 billion possible combinations, so we are all different. And when you bring different people into a room, there will be clashes. Now, sometimes we're lucky and we are kind of aligned, or we are kind of the same, but that doesn't necessarily contribute to a good team, dynamic team environment. So we need actually to have different people on the team because they can bring in different strengths. When we talk about having a strong need for this and a strong need for the opposite, and they get together, well, sometimes they can actually support each other. If you have, and we can take one of the motives as an example, we can take curiosity. So people with a strong need for curiosity, they need information, and preferably intellectual information, abstract thinking, a lot of reflection, asking questions, discussing. Now, if the need is strong enough, they can go on all day with that. So they're not focused on getting the job done. Whereas if you have people at the opposite end of that continuum, they want to get things done. No discussion, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I'm even okay with routines. I actually like routines. So at one end, you have people who need new things and basically just like to sit around and discuss it. And at the other hand, you have people who don't question anything but get the job done. Now, you can imagine if you only have one side of this continuum, it's not going to be a good team. You need people who can do both. And this is where, again, we can have some collisions, because these two opposites definitely doesn't necessarily understand each other unless they understand how both things contribute to the functional team. And this is why I'm very often spend a lot of time working with the team, understanding the motives, understanding the different emotional needs behind it, so that we can understand as much as we possibly can, what is the intention of the people doing the opposite, and how can that contribute to the well-being of the team? And then we do the same with me, so that, okay, that's you, and now I'm trying to express what I need and how come that is, and then how can that contribute? And then we get a mutual understanding. What can be deceiving is that behaviors can be the same, but we can be driven by two opposing needs. So we have different needs, but it leads to the same behaviors. And we can also have the same need, but express them in different ways. And this is, again, the complex nature of people and humans. And this is why when you start working with this, and I can highly, highly recommend, if you haven't gotten that yet, yes, I keep talking about these motives because it is the key to success. The more you understand about them, the more you're capable of running your team, your organization, your business. Simply because there is so much information in it, and this is information that surprisingly few people have investigated. So I can highly recommend that you do more of that, because there is so many secrets to be revealed from inside that understanding. Another very important aspect, and this is what I've seen again and again and again, also when people are talking, when they are in conflict, remember, these motives will not change. The behaviors may change, but the motives will not. So I am who I am, and that is not always positive. I do things sometimes that isn't great, but I do it from my reason, from my positive intention, and some of my needs are very strong, so I have to. It's not a choice I have. But I also have to accept that I cannot change you, because you are you, and you may have things that you do and you need, and I have another. For instance, we know that it is conflict escalating to interrupt people. However, when we look at the motive called social participation, we know that people have a strong need for that. They are talkative, and they also have no problem with interruptions. Whereas people in the opposite end of that scale, they have a huge problem because they have a feeling that we should talk one and then the other person talk. And of course, that's wonderful. And sometimes we have to control it that way, particularly in a mediation. But you got to understand that from the one doing it, there is not a negative intention. It is not about being rude to the other. It's about being eager. And of course, that can be perceived bad, although there was a very positive intention of just saying what's on the mind. And again, we can go into all these wonderful combinations. So the best we can do is to understand the differences and appreciate what that is and what it contributes to the team. So this was a little bit about how you can go in and work with the team, understand what are the differences, where is the problem rooted, because again, we got to find that before we start giving the solution. A lot of people, when they call me, they want me to tell them what is the name of the medicine before I know the problem. And this would be really bad doctoring. So I need to know more. We need to have people coming together in the same room, and then we start asking questions. Now, sometimes I even do pre-interviews with people individually because they seem to be more open, and then I have a better picture when we start up. Other times I come in and we just have everybody in the room, and then we just start talking. And again, of course, with certain rules, because we want it to be in a positive intention of moving forward, of reconciling. And this is a very important thing, and this comes from conflict management. When you are going into this reconciling process, first of all, you have to look at everybody in the room and say, are we here to reconcile? Are we here to do things smarter, better, get along better, communicate better, whatever the challenge is? And then you have to look at everybody in the eyes and get their acceptance. Because if they're not, you're not going to get there. It's as simple as that. Now, we have 2 remaining seminars this week. I just want to do a little promotion. Tomorrow, it's going to be about working from home, because right now so many of us, including me, are working from home. This is still, I'm in my dining room here. It looks like a TV studio and not that cozy. But that's how it works. But of course, that sets out some challenges. Some people are stuck in a little tiny apartment, also with kids. Spouses are together all 24/7, which they're not necessarily used to or like. so many things. So I have invited also Vesna Yachts, who is a relationship expert. She's a psychotherapist, she's a couple therapist, and she knows a lot about how to deal with these issues. So we're going to have a more chatty talk tomorrow, coming in with this. And you're also invited and very welcome to send in questions already now. If you have something where you say, how do you deal with this? Please, please, please send in so that we have something to work with. And remember, tomorrow we're going to have the microphones open so you can ask questions as we go along. So hopefully you're going to be joining in. It's going to be super exciting. I look forward to having Vesna here. And then Friday, we're going to talk about self-development. Who am I and how can I manage myself better? Now, we will run 3 more webinars next week and leading into the Easter. So that's going to be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So we would like to invite you to bring in suggestions. You may already have some. You can share them after we stop the recording. Please, please, please send us or share what would you like to hear more of. I hope you enjoyed today, and we're going to end the recording now here and then open up for questions as we usually do at this time.